Welcome to this week's live video. Apologies in advance for my hoarse voice, the result of the omnipresent smoke we've had here in Western Montana for weeks now. It finally seems to be clearing up. The big news this week is the death of the great economic reformer Zhu Rongji, who died at the age of 97 from an illness. Zhu served as premier. Before that, he was vice premier from the 1998 to the year 2003 under the President Jiang Zemin. Zhu Rongji put an imprint on the 90s and beyond that now still lives on today. He oversaw monumental economic challenges facing China and carried out sweeping reforms. Those included taming runaway inflation that reached as high as 27%, reforming fiscal finances, that was when he was still vice premier, so that Beijing, the center, would have more revenues clawed back from the provinces, a policy that was necessary at the time, but has since become problematic as local governments have become ever more reliant on selling land for their finances. He privatized the state-owned housing stock. That was one of the first articles I wrote that talked in depth about Zhu Rongji. I think it was around 1998. That move, which in effect took the housing stock from the state enterprises that had been provided by your state-owned employer and sold it at nominal rates to workers that were often laid off, set off eventually the massive real estate boom that has made so many Chinese wealthy over the years. He oversaw the downsizing of the massive state sector, working closely with President Jiang Zemin. That policy was called Juada Fangxiao, grasp the large and release the small, which referred to the effort then to marketize the very largest, most important state enterprises, while often doing that by listing them on foreign exchanges, but ensuring that the party still kept tight control over them while letting millions of smaller state enterprises fight to survive, with many millions also going bankrupt. That also included or set off an associated effort by Zhu Rongji when marketizing those state enterprises that saw literally tens of millions of Chinese lose their jobs. Not surprisingly, many of these reforms, although arguably necessary, were not popular at the time. Probably Zhu Rongji's most famous line from 1998 was, "I have prepared 100 coffins here, 99 for corrupt officials and one for myself." Zhu seemed to be saying, I will be steadfast. I will continue with this sweeping reform of the state sector, even as I faced resistance from corrupt officials who had benefited from their control over these state enterprises in the market, in the planned economy and the transition to the market economy. And I will be so steadfast that I will probably die trying to achieve this. Therefore, one last coffin for Zhu Rongji. Not only was Zhu a great market reformer, he was charismatic, direct, often intimidating, who was a source of constant attention of foreign journalists, Chinese journalists, and foreign diplomats, economic reformers overseas, who followed his policies and his proclamations so closely during the 90s and early 2000s. That side of Zhu surfaced often when he gave a press conference at the end of the annual Lianghui, or two sessions, including the CPPCC and the National People's Congress, a tradition for every premier to give that sometimes freewheeling press conference for almost three decades until Xi Jinping ended it in 2024. One notable press conference he gave came in 1999, March 15th. It was a sensitive time for China, coming right after the Asian financial crisis, at a time when many thought China was backtracking on reforms. And it came right before Zhu Rongji himself embarked on a trip to the U.S., which then had a pretty strong anti-China sentiments being expressed across the country, like today often. And he was going there to try to push forward or jumpstart WTO, World Trade Organization, negotiations with the U.S. I had written a cover story at the time. This was a notable press conference for me as well, called China, What's Going Wrong? And it had an image of Premier Zhu on the cover. During the press conference, he was asked, I believe, by Time magazine about whether he feared encountering, quote, hostile or unfriendly atmosphere on his upcoming trip to the U.S. I'm going to read his response in its full now. He said, quote, a trend of opposition to China has emerged in the U.S., a development that deeply concerns us. I do not view my upcoming visit as stepping into a minefield, though I will certainly encounter a great deal of hostility and an unfriendly atmosphere. On February 22nd of this year, Business Week published an article titled, China, What's Going Wrong? It was a rather unusual piece, suggesting that China was facing imminent disaster. I have not seen such an article in any other U.S. magazine. Its publication reflects the current trend in the United States, where internal political struggles have effectively made Sino-U.S. relations a casualty. In this sense, I too have become a victim, Zhu Rongji continued. The magazine featured a photo of me on its cover that made me look like a dead man. Naturally, visiting the U.S. in such an atmosphere is a daunting task, and many in the media have predicted that my visit cannot succeed. Yet, I am going anyway. I've got a picture of the cover here. And, fair enough. I do think in retrospect that this cover was perhaps a bit over the top. The cover language, of course, China, What's Going Wrong? There were things going wrong, but it was a deliberately provocative title. And the image that makes Zhu Rongji look like a dead man. As you can see, Zhu is pictured in a falling star. In retrospect, perhaps not the cover image designed to ensure that one would continue to have a smooth role as a foreign correspondent in China. Now, obviously, that doesn't stop us from reporting in the journals there things that China doesn't like. So what happened then? A Reuters journalist and friend who was sitting next to me quietly turned over and flipped my ID badge that had my name and Business Week where I was working, and I worked for many years, of course, so that it was no longer visible. He was being humorous, and it was rather funny. Another journalist, a former AFP photographer, told me later that he turned and focused his camera on my face, took a bunch of pictures to see my reaction. And he said, to my credit, I did not flinch. Now, I can tell you, I may not have flinched, but a lot was going through my head and wondering what the repercussions would be of getting singled out, not by name, but the cover story I had written in the publication I worked for many years by the notoriously sharp-tongued Zhu Rongji. So what was the result? For about a year, we struggled to get any sort of official interviews. They would flat out turn us down without saying anything, or sometimes say, well, as the premier said, you do not seem to be very friendly to our country. Later, I did have the chance to shake Zhu's hand in a lineup in the Great Hall of the People off of Tiananmen Square. He was not expecting me to be in the lineup. He simply frowned at me and continued on down the line. Um, China, of course, did enter the World Trade Organization despite the challenges that Zhu Rongji faced at home and in the US in the negotiations as well. Um, the fact that China, uh, arguably, Zhu Rongji played the critical role in China's eventual entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001. The results of China's entry, the reform of China's economy that continued, making it more powerful, um, the massive economic boom that was set off that lifted the well-being of countless Chinese, which brought China to where it is today, economic, trading, and technology superpower. None of that would have actually been possible without Zhu Rongji. Today, China, I'm afraid, is sadly lacking in leaders like Zhu Rongji that were driven to reform China's economy, making it more powerful and able to do so with a style and directness, sometimes intimidating directness, uh, which is now absent from today's leaders. Rest in peace, Zhu Rongji. That's it for this week. Tune in at the same time next week.